openings? Case openings? Wait.
A ton of money from
is that
hold on, it's my closing
they
thought.
actually everyone's saying they ran out of 3 because they feel it's profitable.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Catalyst Effect Podcast, episode 34. Don't get used to the intro because that is changing next week. And I'm so tired of seeing that ending. It makes me mad every time Mizzy talked over me, but it's fine. Yeah, we're going to get a new intro next week, so stay tuned for that. But we do have Chase here from OP Games. Chase, how you doing, my friend?
Doing good, Hado. How are you?
Good. It looks like Cloudz is having some power issues. So at some point in the future, I'm sure he'll hop back in here. But
I certainly hope so.
yeah, he sent us a picture of like his monitor and computer's out. So he's got like flip on breakers. So that's unfortunate timing too, right as the show starts.
I mean, we'll try to carry the show until Cloudz come back. But
For sure.
For now, it's you and I, Hado.
Yes, sir. So, can you give us a little background about yourself and how OP Games started, and like what was your inspiration to want to build in Web3?
Yeah. So brief background. So I used to be in finance, traditional finance. I was working for Merrill Lynch and Bank of America back in like early 2000s. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm kind of burned out with finance in general. And so I moved out of Singapore, where I used to live before. And then I moved to China, traveled around for a year. And then chanced upon this gaming hub somewhere in the west of China. It's called Chengdu. That was like circa 2009. And at that time, mobile gaming is still starting. And I kind of started out with that. So I was in marketing and then eventually became a game publisher. So for the last 15 years, I was publishing games, mostly PC games and mobile games from China. Most of these games are either games in China that we try to move into the rest of the world, or the other way around. And I chanced upon two of my co-founders as a game developer. During that time, I was trying to publish their games, and they were like, "You know what, Chase? We want to do this kind of like thing with crypto and blockchain at the same time." And I was like, why don't we do it together, right? Instead of me publishing you. Because publishing games is kind of predatory to begin with, and if you like people in general, if you kind of like these people, you're like, you don't want to mess them up, right? And you want them to kind of be on your side. So I was like, no, I'm not going to publish you guys. I like you enough. And so 2018, we decided to set up OP Games together. So myself, my other co-founder Paul, who's based off in Toronto, and my other co-founder at that time, Gabby, who's now leading YGG or Yield Guild Games. So the three of us started out together. It was a bootstrap kind of thing. During that time, nobody really cares so much about Web3 and gaming. And so we were doing a lot of different stuff. So it's pivot after pivot after pivot. And then in 2021, I believe, or 2022, we raised funding just right before the market crashed. And so it was kind of like fortunate, because in a way you kind of like are given like a few years to build. And that's the reason why we're kind of like, starting now, getting out of the woodwork, because we've pretty much built a lot of stuff already, and we kind of want to have people to try it at this point. But that's kind of like who I am. That's how I started. And that's how I got involved in Web3 gaming and crypto.
So you mentioned something about like starting out in China, right? How does that like compare to the US or like even Europe in your like experience? Like how different is it like gaming wise? Like
gaming wise?
What do they prioritize over there? Because over here, like we're very graphics intensive and like convenience, like something that like helps us be lazy. We consume the fuck out of that. So I'm like wondering what like the difference between here and China is.
No, there's good and bads, quite honestly, Hado, right? So the good in general is kind of like how methodical they are in terms of like perfecting a specific, angle on how to succeed in mobile gaming, for example. as you know, as you've seen, publishers and game developers in China in general are very fast when iterating on things, right? As far as like originality is concerned, sometimes it takes time for them to be able to develop their own content. That's one thing. Like they still draw inspiration from the West and kind of like change that a little bit so that it becomes more, I guess, Chinese, so that it becomes more appealing to their audience. But what I did like about you know, how they do things there is, during the height of the free to play era, they were able to, I guess, you know, this is both a good thing and a bad thing. They were able to come up with a process of like how to efficiently create games that makes money. And so it's a good thing because like there's like you know, a method in how, you know, the process works, in terms of like building games. But it's a bad thing because the games became very, very similar. It's maybe like a reskin version of this and that and whatever, like different art style. But at the end of the day, it's like very, very similar cadence in terms of like how monetization works, because they know that that makes money, right? And that kind of like I think hampered progress a little bit, because now you don't see games that are very experimental. You don't see games that are very out there in terms of like game design, because they're not sure whether it's going to make money or not. They stick to what they know, right? And that's kind of like also is the same thing with publishing, right? As a publisher, I used to kind of like review at least 200 to 300 games per year, to a point where you play every day, and sometimes it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
But out of the 200 games that you review, you publish like say 15 games or 20 games in total. And all of those games are pretty much a carbon copy of the same old game. It's just like different art style. And you say to yourself, you know what, like, am I contributing to kind of like the growth and development of these developers, knowing full well that they're just looking at each other, copying of sorts the way things are done. So I guess like that's good, you know, revenue reach, you know, new heights, but like I guess bad because like there's not a lot of like innovation that sort of like happened during that period of time.
The creativity has certainly gone down. I've seen a lot of those clones you talked about, like on Instagram. I'll see an ad and it looks like Overwatch or it looks like Valorant, but it's not. You can tell.
Yeah,
I definitely see that. And then you're kind of like saying that they've perfected the economy, but like the gameplay has suffered because they've focused so much on the monetization part of it. So that's kind of what you're saying? Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, you know, it's how do you say that? Like similar to like how other people think about game engines, for example, right? Like you know, like prior to 2000, before Unity, like everyone's kind of like building their own thing, right? Like they have like a very customized engine for how they build their games. But when Unity came about, everyone's just like using the templates that Unity created for them. So it's, I guess some people would argue that like it made the limitations. I mean, it made game making a little bit more limited, because then you're not now just kind of like confined to like what Unity provides you. But I just, you know, feel that like people will still innovate continuously. You know, at some point they find like another thing, and that's why, you know, blockchain and Web3 gaming happened, right? Because like that's, I believe, is like a step towards like innovation, and I think that's kind of like why we're here as well.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of like creative ways to do Web3 gaming, so I definitely agree with that. Let's get to some chats here real quick. What's up, Ramen? Legendary big brain decisions. Absolutely. Lady Bones, good morning to you. Happy Sunday, everyone. From Sir Sapient, how you doing, brother? Let's get into some other discussion here. Can we talk about the games that OP Games is, or the project, sorry, that OP Games is building, starting with Arcadia?
Yeah. So essentially, how we envision OP Games in the very beginning is that, I mean, the framework here was the question of like, how do we work with more game developers so that they can move on from Web 2 to Web 3, right? And then you kind of like think about, okay, like in the Web 2 space, who do we target, or who do we want to work with, right? So you have game studios, you have AAA game studios, right? You have you know, this independent game developers as well. And truth of the matter, as a game publisher, the ones that I avoid publishing games for are independent game developers, the solo game devs, or the duos of, you know, the game development space. Specifically because the reason that game publishing is very demanding to its developers, that we wanted them to do a lot. Like if we wanted to have them get featured in Google Play or in Apple app store, we want to work with them, and they have to be agile and quick, right? And so we're like, okay, in Web 2, a lot of like this independent game developers are getting fucked over by the fact that they're just alone, right? And there's just not a lot of options for them. And then in terms of like how they make money, um, it's a lot of advertisements, because like as an indie, you're very limited to what you can build, right? You don't have a lot of capitalization, and even the publishers don't really want to publish you. And so we're like, okay, Paul, let's zero in on indies, at least for now, because they're the guys that are very quick at picking up innovation, but at the same time, they're very gung-ho in terms of like what stuff they wanted to pick up on, right? One of the things that became challenging was indies are very idealistic, and at that time crypto is kind of like in that scammy phase of sort, right? Like there's a lot of like bad press about crypto in general and blockchain in general, although they're kind of like not the same anyway. And so we found it really hard to bring them over into Web3 as OP Games, because of the fact that crypto has a bad rap, right? And so right now what we're really focusing on would be a couple of products, and all of these products are geared towards helping independent game developers move on from Web 2 to Web 3, and Arcadia being the platform where game developers can self-upload their games. It's permissionless. Well, it's kind of permissionless because we still need to approve it. We just want to make sure that the code is okay, and that there's no content that's kind of like not great for the general public. But other than that, like they can upload their games, they can have as much games as possible in Arcadia. And then there's multiple monetization touch points within Arcadia they can use, right? Like they can go for us like the most familiar one, which is advertising if they want to. Although of course, if you want to move away from that, they can run tournaments on their games and turn their games into like multiplayer competitive tournaments if they wanted to. There's an SDK for that.
Can I ask you a question about the tournaments? Sure. So a lot, like a big narrative that I heard coming into this space 2 years ago was like, tournaments are going to allow us to play out players instantly. We're not going to have to wait like 6 months or a year or like stuff like that. So on your platform, is it instantaneous? Like, is there like a expectation or standard? Because I know that's a very common theme with Web3 gaming. People, even tournaments in Web3 gaming, people are still having to wait for a period of time.
So here's the difference though, right? Depending on the game that you create, right? In Web 2, a lot of these indies create very casual or even hyper casual games, right? These are like platformers, right? It's time based or skills based shooter or anything that's very, very simple, single player. But if you asynchronously create a tournament around it, it can be like highest score or fastest time. This kind of thing is very good for tournaments, except that the kinds of games that we're dealing with here are very simple games, right? And within Arcadia, it's as simple as if your game is decked around tournaments, you have the SDK available. Any player can log into Arcadia, look at the games, and say, "Hey, I want to create a tournament around this." You have like a create a tournament button. You put in the prize pool. You can seed it yourself, or you can make a free tournament if you don't want any prize pool around it. You can even add a layer of buy-in, so that anyone who wants to join that tournament can buy in for like, I don't know, like $1 or $2 or whatever the amount is. And then that becomes part of the pool that at the end of the tournament period gets distributed to how many winners you've allotted for it so far. So it's all instant. And so the thing is like, once the tournament is over, it gets deployed back to whoever the wallets of the winners are, instantaneously. So you don't have to wait.
And so when you say SDK, you're saying that this is like in-game stuff.
In-game stuff, yeah. So as a game, as a game, a game, you have the option. If you're the developer, you have the option to add this SDK so that people can create tournaments around your game. If you don't want to, then you can't have people making tournaments around your game. And that's one of the reasons why they like this SDK, because there's new ways of making money for their games.
So you're so like, I don't want to say the whole effort of Arcadia, but like part of it is to live within the games. Is that like kind of the vision?
It's one of the visions, right?
Mm.
It's part of it is to live within the games, right? I think the overarching goal here is as a platform, am I providing more options for the developers to create wealth for themselves, right? Because like I don't know if you've seen this, but like we did a survey to our independent game developer partners. So we have a guild called OP Guild.
Okay.
There's about 3,800 game developers in the guild, and survey was, how much are you earning per year for all of your games? And 72% of them says $500 and below for all
Ooh,
of their games.
for a
So
year.
clearly, per year. So
Wow.
clearly, they can't make a living out of their games, right?
Not at all.
And the way they do that is like, okay, they show advertisements, or they do licensing with other gaming platforms where they get paid like, I don't know, like $50 per game or something for them to be able to license their game. But it's not enough though, right? And that's, I think, one of the reasons why OP Games is trying its hardest to create more opportunities that would allow these game developers to, earn more money.
Yeah, we need your infrastructure like all across the board because there's a game I was playing. I won't mention specifics, but um, every time there was like an in-game thing that I had to do, it would boot me out of the game into a browser. And I gotta tell you, as a gamer that's been gaming since I was like 4,
Yeah.
like having your experience like break the immersion, you know what I mean? Like it's just not. It doesn't make me want to play it for that
Yeah.
long. Like I can't. Like even in-game stuff. Like if I have to log into my Switch for Switch Online, even that pisses me off. But I like something that you have to do to get through it, right? But I just like that you said it was in the game because like we need more things that are in game native to the game because it makes it feel more like a game and less like
Correct.
an app. Because you go to like a website, it's like now it's an app. It's not really a game, right?
I mean, Web3 in general has been struggling with that for a while, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's just, plenty of stuff that we need to kind of like really sort out ourselves. And I think it's probably because like our, Web3 primitives happen in the web in the very beginning, right? And that's actually one of the reasons why we started off Arcadia on the web, right? Right now it's mobile responsive, but Arcadia is generally a web-based game because most of the indies don't have that infrastructure to to publish themselves in the App Store or the Google Play Store, or don't have the kits to use for creating a Switch game or like a PlayStation game or of some sort, right?
Right.
It does take money too, and so the lowest barrier to entry for them to create a game is through game engines like Phaser or Godot or any web facing game engines that can easily be deployed as an HTML5 game. And that's kind of like what's Arcadia is kind of like focusing on for now, including Unity, so that it's easy for them to just upload their games in the platform quite easily, and not go out of that game anymore. And so because like I think what also breaks the experience, and I think this is true for a lot of us, is advertising. I think we just gotten used to just seeing ads in between some of the games that we play on mobile, for example, or online, to a point where we feel that it's necessary, or we feel that we get used to it so much that we're okay with it. But really, if you remove it, the experience is going to be very different.
And just to wrap up this conversation real quick, because I want to go from chats here. I also see ads all the time on my phone, and it's like, this is how the game looks. And then you see the comments, that's not how the game is at all. So like the thing too is like even the ads could be misleading too. So like it's a very interesting time right now in gaming because there are some games that are like hidden gems and they don't know how to advertise, and there are some games that are like just not what they're selling or advertising. So it could go either way. What's up, Addis? Happy Sunday to you too as well. Got Cyber Strategy in here. Big fan of the show. Big fan of you as well, Cyber Strategy. Keep doing what you do. Addis also asks, you mentioned that SDK is available. What other SDKs are available for devs on Arcadia? Also, what are some fun or some functionalities that you want but don't have yet for Arcadia?
Yeah, so most of the SDKs that we have, thank you for the question, Addis, but most of the SDKs we have in Arcadia is specifically geared towards creating monetization opportunities for developers, right? So Tournament SDK is available. The tipping SDK is also available. So meaning if players like your game, they can tip on your game, buy you coffee or whatever it is. The next one that we're working on would be subscription, right? And so like if you're a game developer with a roster of like 20 games, and say you want to make 10 available for your players for free, and then the other 10 you want to paywall that. So that's kind of like where they subscribe to you, kind of like Patreon style, right? And the other bit that we're working on, and hopefully we get to release this by October, is the game fractionalization portion of the platform. So what it means essentially is, as the game developer, indies are normally the developers. They're the business developers. They're the marketer. They're user acquisition. They're the community leader. They're pretty much everyone, right? All rolled into one person. And so what we were trying to accomplish here is how do we create an environment for these indies where they do have allies within their game, kind of like turning their games into fractionalized NFTs. And so you have this entire game that gets minted into an actual NFT, fractionalized into 100, for example, and then a portion of that gets sold off to the community. And now the community gets to partake in how you are building the game, how you are marketing the game, how you are basically creating opportunities for the game. And so we're putting this in such a way where there's a new ERC standard called ERC 6551 that we've been working with a couple of people for the last year, where your NFTs are essentially wallets of its own. And so it can accumulate assets on its own. And that's kind of like where the fractionalized NFTs come in, where if Hado owns an NFT of one of the games in Arcadia, if the games do well, then Hado will also do well, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like one of the goals that we want to try to implement in the next couple of months.
It's a very interesting way to like divvy out like ownership of products, because it's more like direct ownership versus like the NFTs that we've been using in the past have been just like maybe a glorified battle pass with ownership. So and now it's just like more like we have like a stake in the game. So that's a very interesting way that you like phrase it. That's very interesting. Cyber Strategy said tournament tipping, subscription, game function. I cannot say this word. Functionalization.
Fractionalization.
I'm missing the fucking words up. You're right. Fractionalization, opening to indie creators to fractionalize NFTs to become partial owners. These are all very powerful ideas to allow to create inside the ecosystem and earn from that work. Exactly. You're basically taking that economy model that is successful and like allowing the community to partake in it, which probably is the more like, honestly, a lot of people were talking ownership like for a long time, for the past 2-3 years. I've been in this space technically since 21, and I've heard so much talk about you can own your shit, you can own your shit, you can own your shit. And it's like, that's cool, but why do I want to own my shit? And how do I own my shit, right? These things have never been like laid out and explained, right? And so we have like another show we do called BIG. There's a dude on there, Mr. Console. He always talks about how economy is so important, right? And I think economy is like a big part of the game. That's pretty much like the biggest part of the Web3 game is like you make a game, it's awesome, great, but like the Web3 part is the economy, right? And I think like the things that we're lacking is like, first of all, like we're not doing enough, right, in that regard, but also the infrastructure is lacking. And so that's where your product is coming in to play. And I see like a pretty good synergy there with like your product kind of helping elevate Web3 gaming. Because the other thing you mentioned too is the indie studios, they have to do everything, right? They have to know how the blockchain works. They have to market. They have to make the game. They got to fix the issues. They got to stop the hackers. So like they may not be able to manage all that, right? So if there's infrastructural parts that people can trust and it's like verifiable on blockchain, you can log in all that stuff, I see how that's very valuable to the space.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we want to try to accomplish, right? And that's the reason why like we're building this whole ecosystem around OP games, right? Even OP Guild, we just conceived that a couple of months ago. It's being run not by myself, but a rather really good indie developer friend. who's been in the space for the last 15 years as well. Has been doing a lot of like indie game jams over the last 10 years, and been dealing with a lot of indies in general, right? And one of the things that I noticed in the Web3 space is we always talk about retention for players, right? Like when you get in the game, how can you retain me as a player, right? But I think on an overarching kind of like universe, you think about like if a game developer gets into the Web3 space, how do you retain them as a developer and for them not to leave and go back to Web2? And it's really hard because number one, as an indie, you don't have, I mean, of course you have friends, but you don't have kind of like that community where when you move into the Web3 space, you're like, okay, somebody's helping me out, or somebody's like, working me into how the culture is of Web3. Because like, Web3 in general, when you move in from Web2 to Web3, it's not just about, the technology that you use. It's not like, okay, here's the documentation, learn it, now you're a Web3 dev. That's not how it works, right? Like there's also a lot, there's a lot of things in place there. There's
a
a
lot of
huge
gray
paradigm
area.
shift, right? It's
Yeah.
a huge paradigm shift. You need to be able to fully understand that this is not the same way as like how Web2 monetization works as well. And you have to fully understand that the player base are different. Like there's like a lot of guilds here that are kind of like working in swarms, work from one game to another, as opposed to like in Web2 where you just look for one or two or three independent players that you can actually help you play test your game. So that's kind of like where OP Guild comes in as well. It's like, we want you to remain in Web3 as opposed to dip your toes a little bit and then go back to Web2 and do your merry way, right? And that's kind of like why I think an ecosystem in general needs to be very well thought of, and also requires, I guess, more infrastructure partners around it. And that's what we're trying to work on, OP Guild, because we can't build this alone, right? We have the developers, but we need some infrastructure within Web3 that already exists that would work with us to retain these game developers and continue building for us.
Yeah, it's a very, very huge need in this industry. And I think that you're spot on with your assessment there. Cairo, shout out to you, my friend, listening while you drive. Please drive safe out there, my friend.
Drive safely.
All right, let's go into a dream world real quick. I am making a game. I'm an indie developer, but I can't do all this stuff that I just mentioned. I can't do it by myself. What's the onboarding process like for me if I want to join Arcadia?
So here's the thing, right? Two ways, right? Arcadia is fairly friendly to independent game developers who doesn't have any knowledge of Web3 or blockchain in general, right? In fact, you can go into Arcadia as a player and not deal with those wallets and stuff and just play the games directly, right? And so if you're a game developer and you encounter Arcadia, you get into Arcadia. There's an option there that's, I think, it's called Game Creator. You click on that one. You sign up with your email. And then we receive an application saying you want to be a game creator. That gets automatically approved. And then it allows you to come, be in the game creator, some portions of it allowing you to upload your game, right? One game after another if you want to, right? And so you create your developer profile, upload the game, and then your game is now playable in Arcadia. Marketing team will do its best to float your game in the front, back, and center as kind of like a game of the week of sort. And then we kind of like work with our community to have them try your game. Now, at this point, your game is just basically just any kind of like game online, right? You can get onto it, but there's no tournaments just yet, right? And so that's kind of like where OP Guild comes in. So now as a game developer, we invite you to the guild, right? So we have a Discord channel for the guild. The guild talks about like, oh, how do you integrate this SDK or this SDK? They're very helpful, right? And so you learn that process a little bit, and then you add a tournament into your game if you want to. If you don't want to, that's completely fine as well, right? Like, we're more than happy to just have you in Arcadia as well. But that's kind of like where the overarching goal is, right? Because we don't want to stop from just having you in Arcadia as a game. We want you to continuously explore what Web3 and blockchain can do for your game, whether that's in Arcadia, or if your game is super huge that it's not in Arcadia, that's completely fine too. The guild can help you out with that. So the guild, in essence, wants to turn game developers from game developers that knows how to build games to game developers that knows how to build games, but also knows how to utilize blockchain technology so they can push their games further into Web3. And that's kind of like where we're kind of at the moment is. Onboarding is fairly simple. It's either they go to opguild.dev and be part of the guild, and we work with them on getting their games in Arcadia, or they just go directly to Arcadia and be a game creator and upload their games very quickly.
One quick question before we go to our quick
Sure.
ad break. Is this a platform that you download games from, or is it just a publisher that goes to like the Epics and Steams of the world to distribute the games? Which one is it?
So think about it as itch.io. I'm not sure if you've heard of itch.io, but it's basically where indies default to upload their games.
Okay.
Because the game files are very small, Arcadia can host it. And so when you get into Arcadia, you see multiple games, casual, hyper casual. It's there, it's playable in the platform itself.
Gotcha. So on the website itself.
On the website itself.
Alrighty. Chat, we're going to hit a quick ad break, and then we'll come back and keep going into these questions here with Chase from OP Games. See you guys in a bit. Alpacas! Now to have your attention, today's episode is sponsored by DeFi Land. And on DeFi Land, you can play Alpaca Dash. Alpaca Dash shatters the mold of ordinary idle racing games. Dive into a world of strategic depth with a vast array of tactics to conquer any environment. Unleash your alpaca's unique strength and craft the perfect skill combinations to dominate the race course. Every competition is a thrilling odyssey bursting with stunning visuals and an electrifying soundtrack that fuels your epic showdown. The unexpected awaits at every turn. Prepare for heart-pounding comebacks that will keep you on the edge of your seat from the starting line to the checkered flag. Are you guys ready to unleash your inner champion? If so, head on over to almightyalpacas.com and start racing today. almightyalpacas.com. almightyalpacas.com. So there's a fun fact on that ending to that ad. I could not say that last part unless I did the clapping cadence. So I like to tell that story every time.
I mean, fractionalization.
Fractionalization.
Right. That works. I think I like your method.
Yeah, no, sometimes I got to dumb it down. So we talked about how games can onboard onto Arcadia. So let's talk about some of the games on there. What are like some of the recent games, and how has like the players responded to it? Have they liked it? You know, what's the feedback been?
So most of the games right now are casual, hyper casual games. A big chunk of the new games that came in from in Arcadia last few weeks was games from. There's 63 games right now in the platform. Most of these games that came into the platform the last week or so was from a game jam that we hosted back in April. So every year we host a game jam. It's called GameDev.js Game Jam. Usually there's about 3,000 developers signing up for that, and usually about 300 submissions per year. There's a couple of game developers that submitted a few platformer games in the platform. Power Up Adventure is one of them. It's fairly simple in mechanics, but at least in mechanics in your head, like it's kind of like a simple jumping game of some sort, right? But it requires a lot of timing. It requires a lot of kind of like really good skill and how do you say that? I forgot that word where your reflexes, I guess reflexes, like requires good reflexes, right? And then we do have a couple of AI games that we're trying to kind of like incubate at the moment, which will be available in Arcadia soon as well. And I think the most recent game that we have available is kind of like a pool. It's called Pucket. It's a puck that you, I guess, try to like shoot in all directions, and you gain the high score, right? And so these types of games usually are easy to make in the sense that you can actually create a game in like 4 weeks time or 3 weeks time. The hard part is to add more levels to it, and then just make it a little bit more appealing to the players as a game. One of the things that we're working with right now, as far as like indie game devs are concerned, is bringing in more platformers that are more story based, so that it's a little bit more immersive for players to actually play them. There's a game in the platform right now called Time's Up. I believe that's the name of the title. I may be wrong, but it's an entry to a game jam that we did last year, which is pretty good. The theme of the jam is create a game around the theme time. And this game is all about being in a space where there's a negative and a positive, and that you have to I guess you have to recreate time, because the time has been ruined and destroyed. It's from a game developer called Feature Creep, and he has a lot of other really really good games in the platform as well. So I think what we're going to be doing moving forward, Hado, would be to feature more game developers that have like a roster like really cool indie games in their Rolodex, so that we can go ahead and highlight the good stuff that they've got.
Yeah, because it sounds like you're wanting to expand like the category. Because I would make the argument the category you're right now describing is like arcade, which the name Arcadia makes so much more sense now
Yeah.
in my head. But yeah, that is interesting that you're gonna like kind of venture out into like more indie story based titles, and that's a very interesting thing because I don't think I've ever come across too many. Maybe like some co-op stuff, but like you're talking about like single player story. Like I've never really seen that in Web3, so that would be very interesting to see like how Web3 ties into that. I've never seen that before. So
Yeah. I mean, and here's the thing though, right? Like if you're supporting a lot of like independent game developers, you have to realize that indies are very experimental. A lot of the stuff that we have in the mainstream right now came about because of indies, right? Like even like I don't know, like think about Angry Birds, for example. There's a lot of like open sourcing being done by a lot of independent game developers and creators in general. Like a physics engine that Angry Birds has been using in the past was an open source physics engine. And so the creator of that physics engine, Box2D, I guess gave Angry Birds the leg up to create the physics of like how the birds hit those, I don't know, those walls and those pigs falling up down the hill. That physics, Angry Birds didn't make that. Like, it's just an open source thing that they picked up from Box2D, and it became a very integral part of the game, and Angry Birds became $1 billion enterprise. And a big help comes from that physics engine that's open source. So indies are pretty good. I don't think they're just like given a lot of recognition as they should. And I think that's kind of like one of the reasons why I resonate more towards our indie friends, because they're not really looked into compared to bigger studios, for example. Even in Web3, for example, if you think about it, like a lot of like the developers you want to bring into Web3 are, the big studios, the AAA games, all that, really cool stuff, like great graphics, amazing, 3D graphics, for example. But nobody really cares so much about low poly games that, are more mechanics heavy, because it's I guess not the mainstream.
Yeah, it's the casuals. So like when you get into like the nitty gritty of a game, the mechanics are everything, right? Like
correct.
You look at a game like Melee, you found that you could wave dash, you could like do a bunch of shines. All the movement in that game was like all mechanical, right? And so you're right. Like there's not really much thought when it comes into that. It's just more thought. Like, again, it's a lot of things to manage. And it's like, what do I prioritize as a business? Do I prioritize monetization, or do I prioritize like a good product? Because you can get monetization without necessarily having a good product in this space.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question, because it sounds like to me that you were like describing maybe not necessarily licensing, but it sounds like licensing, where it's like, let me license out Arcadia. Has that ever crossed your mind to like license out like to bigger titles that don't want to necessarily live on the platform but want to use your technology?
Yes. We're completely open to it though, right? We had conversations with a couple of like bigger products that doesn't necessarily want to live in Arcadia, right? Because if you come to think of it, Arcadia right now, all games are playable there. But there is a category in Arcadia which we are going to be opening up very soon, which is fully on-chain games. Right now, these fully on-chain games, we're actually creating one right now. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say it just yet, but it's going to be out really really soon. It's a fully on-chain game.
Yeah.
It's in development at the moment, roughly around finished on the beta side of things, about to be released. And this is like, in cooperation with friends in the industry, like in the Web3 space. But we have a fully on-chain game category in Arcadia right now. And some of these games are going to be using some of the stuff that we've built, because we're very, I would say, we're very big on open sourcing, right? In a way that, Web3 is all about like building stuff on top of stuff, right? If that makes
Interoperability
sense.
too.
Right.
Yeah.
That level of interoperability, like, why would you build something when somebody already built it, right?
Right.
And so I think it is going to be very crucial to the space for us to be able to create something that is useful and beneficial for others. And so within Arcadia, I told you before that, okay, like games are playable in the platform, but for on-chain games, those games are playable on their platform. We're just showing exactly what those games are for now. And
Gotcha.
some of the SDKs are being used, like, for example, tournament SDKs, that can be used by anybody outside of Arcadia if they want to.
Nice.
Because, as a game, you're not confined to being a small game. If you're a very big game that hosts your own game in your own server, you just take the SDK and then use it on your game, and now you have a tournament in place.
Yeah, and I don't know how long I've been wanting that to happen, because then you can see like who are the top players in game XYZ whatever, and then you can kind of do like a little bit of scouting if you want, right? And then now you have this like gamer resume that's on chain. Like that's just a beautiful use of blockchain to me. Addis says, is there any story from devs that have come to the game jam that have inspired you?
There's one in particular, actually. Well, there's a couple of them, right? But I guess like number one, of course, I won't go far. Would be the head of the guild of OP Guild, Andre. Right. So Andre has been bootstrapping his company called Enclave Games for the last 10, 15 years, right? And one of the biggest issues a lot of these game developers have would be funding. And so what we did was, right. I think that was a few years ago, 2023, I believe, or 2022. We're like, okay, Andre, we want to help out the industry in general, right? And so we're like, okay, gather in the game engines that game developers are using at the moment that rely on the goodness of your hearts as a game dev. And we'll try to help them, right? And so what we did was we created this NFTs back then called Arcadians, right, which is a gaming NFT. And some of those NFTs have games created for them in Arcadia until now. And so we decided, you know what, let's go ahead and create a grants program for some of these gaming engines, right? And so we created a grants program for Godot, for Blender, and for Phaser, right? So these are really good friends of ours, who's now have more users and players because of what Andre and Arcadians was able to accomplish. And right now, after a few years of bootstrapping his company, he's still doing that right now, but he's now also heading OP Guild, because he wanted more game developers to really see that there is some stuff going on in Web3 that's good, right?
Yeah.
Not just like like the scams that they think about. And so Andre is very instrumental in bringing in more game developers into Web3, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. No, that's a very good point. The stigma around this space has always been NFT equals scam, and why would I play this game if the other game does it better? And it's good to know like what is out there, because then you could also think of it this way too. The competition isn't really that high, right? Like, because the bar hasn't been raised that high, right? So you could also like very opportunistic be like, I could make a banger product and then it could take the entire space by storm.
Yeah.
Especially if you got the economy down. Because what I've noticed in this space is like a lot of gamers hop from game to game because the economy's hot and then it cools down. They hop to this game, cools down. So if there's a game that has more consistency with their economy on top of the fun, like that's just a recipe for a good product.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of like why Web3 in general is, a very nascent, but also at the same time unfamiliar space for a lot of Web2 game developers who's trying to get into Web3, right? Because Web2 game devs, they build games for the enjoyers. That's why they build the games, right? So even if it's a simple platformer or a simple racing game, for example, these games are built with your enjoyment in mind, or at least a subset of their player base. A big chunk of what they don't know about is economy, right? And so, as a solo game dev, it's really hard for me to see myself in Web3 without other people helping me out, because all I know is how to build games. But Web3 has kind of like created a new breed of motivation on why I play games. Do I play games because I want to have fun? Do I play games because I want to, get an airdrop from so and so? Do I play games because I, want to make more money through play to earn? So these kinds of stuff we don't have back in Web 2. And so I think Web 2 game developers are kind of seeing it now, and they're like, I like this, or I don't like this shit. Like either one of
yeah.
those, right? And it's one of those things where you can't force them to to fully embrace that paradigm shift right away, because Web3 games in general has created different ways of like how motivated are we
Absolutely.
in playing these games.
I do want to get to Spark here in a bit and just ask your overall look on the Web3 gaming market in general. Do have to run an ad real quick, and then we'll come back with a special announcement. So stay tuned for that, chat.
Hey guys, this episode of the Catalyst Effect podcast is sponsored by WAGMI Games, Web3's first universe encompassing multiple games, animes, collectibles, and more. Their current game, WAGMI Defense, is a mobile defense tower game that is available on Android, BlueStacks, and Google Play. Wield your card deck, deploy characters, and defend your towers. Optimize your deck to launch attacks and dismantle your opponent's base. Rank victorious and emerge with bragging rights, collectible cards, and Nifty. WAGMI Defense's universe is set in the year 3022 and unfolds in Nimash, an off-world laboratory serving as the backdrop for immoral experiments. Though the world may seem dark now, the choices made by players, whether human or alien, will shape the outcome of the Nifty Wars. Thank you to WAGMI Games for being an official sponsor of the Catalyst Effect podcast. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, so hopefully, Cloudz, your power comes back on sometime today, because it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So
I'm gonna replace you, Cloud. Like if you don't come back,
you're gonna lose your job, bro. Come back. All right, so I did tease a special announcement. So without further ado, we're gonna get into it, and here it is. So usually, actually, Damien, if you want to come up and talk about this, you totally can, because Mizzy's not here. So I don't know if Damien can hear me. Oh, he's typing. Okay. Yeah, so basically we go through and make out these little badges for people that come on the shows. So this is the badge that we created for OP Games. And let me put that on the screen real quick. Bam, boom. So yeah, this is the badge that Damien and Mizzy have crafted. You can mint. This is for the chat. Anybody that's watching the show, by the way, can come click this link right here. This is posted to the Catalyst Effect, the Catalyst OG page on Twitter. Oh, there's Damien. And yeah, just click that link. You guys can claim that badge, and it will have utility. Damien, take it away.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm just gonna hop in real quick. How's it going, man? Nice to officially meet you. Usually Mizzy does the speeches about the badges, but for this one, we decided to go like we saw that banner you guys have on your page, and we kind of felt like it's like kind of bridging like the indie gamers to the mainstream, so that's why we went with that for the background for the badge. And all our badges are PS1 inspired, because me and Mizzy are huge PS1 fans. Well, all of us at Catalyst really are. So we always have that little sidebar right there. And yeah, man, I hope you like it. and we hope we did OP Games justice.
Me love it. So yeah, you did.
All right.
All right, let's go.
Yeah, appreciate you, Damien. Thanks for hopping in and giving us some insight on that. So, you got to get into Spark, okay? So the question is, Keith, tell us more about Spark. And
Yeah.
are there any projects that have been incorporating it with Spark? Like, have they been working with Spark? What's that been like?
So right now, Spark is on beta. So essentially, just to give you an idea of what Spark is, I guess like it's to put it simply, Spark is an AI tooling that transforms your NFTs into networked playable characters, or what we call NPCs, right? I mean, it's non-playable characters, but we just kind of like coined the term network playable characters. The reason that, like, imagine your favorite NFTs, no longer a static image, but a living and a breathing character capable of forming genuine connections or accumulating assets or contributing meaningful experiences to gameplay. That's how we envision what Spark is. So right now, Spark is in its beta. We went live. Well, we went live a little bit during ETH Denver in partnership with Buffycorns, the ETH Denver NFTs that they were giving away at that time. So what Spark does, number one, is so once you spark your NFTs, it turns your NFTs into ERC6551 tokens, or a different kind of how do you say this? Like there's a different status on an ERC6551 versus an ERC721 token. ERC721 is kind of static. ERC6551 is a wallet of its own. It can accumulate its own assets and so on and so forth. And so what we did for Spark for now is like you're able to chat with that NFT. It's animated, and it's also able to create its own lore, right? Obviously the the LLM model is still getting fine-tuned because it does a lot of hallucinations every once in a while, but the end result would be that your NFT is something that you can use outside of your wallet and becomes playable in Arcadia eventually.
Oh my god,
So
it's such a content creator friendly idea. Holy shit.
Well, it really is. And so think about it though, right? So let's say, for example, you have an NFT. What we did is we gated it for a while because AI services are kind of expensive. And so if you open it to any kind of NFT, it's going to be chaos, right? And it's going to be expensive for us. And so we want to partner up with one NFT partner after the other and make that available for that group of people. So let's say, for example, I don't know, like Axie Infinity, right? We open up Spark to Axie Infinity. Any kind of Axie can be sparked, meaning it becomes animated, it becomes 6551, it can start accumulating assets of its own. So now we start accepting. So in Arcadia, when you log into Arcadia, you use your wallet. But instead of using your wallet, you can eventually just log in with your NFT. And that NFT becomes your wallet that could accumulate badges, that accumulate ERC20 tokens, that can accumulate other NFTs inside Arcadia if you're playing under that. So we did a test run of that, and it kind of like increased the gameplay session from between 5 minutes to 20 minutes, because instead of you as a player playing just one session of Arcadian games, you decide to, okay, let me be a completionist and log in using my other NFT that I've sparked, and then accumulate the badges, get the do the quests, all that stuff. And then you're like, oh, I'm not yet done, let me try my other NFT that's sparked. And so the goal here is to, how do you bring these NFTs outside of your wallet instead of just like accumulating and keeping it? And that's kind of like our goal towards Spark at this point. We've deployed a bot in Farcaster for Spark. And so any kind of NFT or image that you plug into Farcaster, if you make a call on that bot, it sparks that specific image or NFT, and changes it a little bit. Like makes it a little bit more animated, and then eventually we'll add more lore building capabilities into the process.
My mind is exploding with possibilities right now. Like I'm thinking back to like Ready Player One, and if like someday this gets further along where I can like put on a VR goggle and see my NFT next to me, and then like game with my NFT, and then like me and the NFT start yelling back and forth, and I just make comedy out of that. Because I kind of do that already with one of my characters on my show, Astronaut. I'm just thinking like, how could I like level up that and go to the next level? And it's
That'd
like
be perfect,
an
honestly.
NFT companion. Like that's just something
Yeah.
I've never thought about.
Yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere, though, right? You got to start
Yeah.
simple, because like, a lot of times, like, and this is what I've noticed in the Web3 space, like, the vision is so grand, which is fantastic, amazing. I applaud that. But sometimes we get distracted from the very grand vision that we forgot to lay the foundation for the
Yeah.
very basic thing that would allow you to get there.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Addis says in chat, leveling up in the background with this staircase, seeing how OP games levels up a dev's experience. That's fire. Absolutely. Honestly, Chase, you've been making me think about how like lacking of infrastructure this space is. Cause like you're talking, like you said, we have like a big like home run that we want to hit with like the ideas and stuff. But it's like building this simple infrastructure to help you get there needs to be done. And so, shoot for the stars. I'm not telling anyone to like not achieve their dreams at all. But what I'm saying is we got to start somewhere to get there first. So like,
and
yeah.
You know what really helps is like if you're like if you have a company or like if you're founding a company, what really helps is having a co-founder who is the complete opposite of yourself. For me, Paul is that person, right? He's like has the grandest ambitions of all, and you kind of like pull each other, in the sense that you kind of like put a baseline on like where to begin. I'm more of a realist, and he's the dreamer in the team, right? And you kind of need both, for things to function properly.
So, question on like the overall market look of Web3 gaming. Is there anything in your radar in particular that you've been eyeing? Like, wow, they're doing that really well.
One of the things that I've been looking and eyeing at for the last couple of months, is on-chain games in general, right? Or fully on-chain games. Autonomous Worlds, for example, is one of them, right? I think there's a couple of people that I've been talking to, that I'm getting myself involved in as well, in terms of like creating this fully on-chain AI game. So that combination of both AI and fully on-chain game is going to, I feel like it's going to take off, right? Maybe not necessarily financially, but rather in terms of like innovation and the stuff that can be done, right? There's one project that I'm looking at right now, where, well, it's called God Mode, the working title, and it's basically taking the game, taking the personal gameplay away from the game, if that makes sense. So you have a training dojo, like AI agents, for example, where you get a seed that you deploy on chain, and this seed is already trained by AI to create a game of its own. So once it's deployed on chain, it just basically turns into a game world. You don't have any control of it. You're just watching it, seeing it grow and expand based on how the AI trained it. And what you do as a player is you deploy an AI agent to live in that world, and to start playing with itself. And so you don't have any control of it once it's deployed. So in a way, you're like playing God, so to speak, where everything gets deployed and AI takes over. And
It's a
all
very
you need to
interesting
do,
concept.
all you do is to watch. And if you wanted to interfere, you need to deploy something in the game again that changes the course of their development, however that may look like. So the game is outside. The game is, how do you develop an AI agent that would disrupt or that would harmonize the world that's developing,
Wow.
on chain. And that, I feel like, it's like a really, really cool thing.
That's like an evolution to me of either Civilization or Sin City.
Pretty much.
Yeah, because it's like it's so is there like a duration that it ends or just keeps going forever?
It's infinite.
Oh my
It's
god.
infinite. And so one of the questions was like, what if the characters or the people becomes racist or something like that?
Mhm.
I mean, like honestly, like they're like we have no control over it. But what you have control over it is adding infiltrators or like adding like more characters in the game that could potentially oppose through whatever culture is happening in there. So you're basically looking at like how we've developed as humanity, for example, over the
Yeah.
last millennia, in terms of like how we've disrupted culture, how we've destroyed things, how we've created things. Except that for this game, you're not playing at all, or at least you're observing. You're like observing a bacteria in a petri dish develop into something huge.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. And maybe there would be a point where AI is like, I want gamers to play my game. And it does like it like carries a moment in time where like it stops like gatekeeping or whatever, and it just lets people
Yeah,
in, and then it closes the gate. And
yeah.
then
And
you
And
know,
you know what? Some of the games in Arcadia, for example, some of those that are not tournament ready just yet, right? Like, but I did notice that like every once in a while when I observe the back end of like how things are getting played, when there's like a very minor tournament, and then the prize pool is like I don't know, like $100 or $200. Sometimes there are AI bots that gets deployed, and you're like, okay, let's kick out this bot in the game, and then you realize another bot gets deployed by somebody else. And so sometimes every once in a while there are games that are being played by proxy by a couple of people instead of them playing the game. It's their proxy bot
yeah.
playing the games and competing with each other. And so now we're like, okay, we're trapped in this dilemma of like, how do we deal with this? And obviously one of the things we deal with is like reputation. so instead of so instead of and that's that kind of like where Spark comes in too, right? Like, so instead of banning all of these bots, let them play against each other. But you require a higher reputation. That means you have to prove you're human. You have to prove that you do all of this stuff within the platform before you qualify for a higher prize pool tournaments, which this bots, for example, wouldn't really qualify for. And so I'm seeing like a combination of like people playing, but every once in a while I see a combination of like several people who owns bots that deploys these bots in the platform and play against each other.
Are
So
you,
it's yeah.
does that worry you like on a security front that there might be some kind of breach there, or like even like a potential DDoS attack to like get people offline and
Yeah,
maybe
that's
create their own
that's
tournaments and
that's
stuff?
that's crazy though, right? Like that's one of those
Yeah.
things that you want to try to avoid though, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why at least like on the server side of things, you want to try to make it as secure as possible. But we do know for a fact that sometimes when people are persistent, it's really hard
Mhm.
to combat that. And so the other method that we're trying to do is enabling reputation to be the like, kind of like what you said, like a resume, right?
Yeah.
Prove that you're human, prove that you've played this much games, prove that this is kind of like exactly who you are before you qualify for tournaments that are high stakes. Because a lot of times when money is involved, people tend to, and they do whatever, right? In web 2 they
Yep.
do that for fame and glory, right?
Yeah.
Like they cheat or like they do bots and stuff because they just want to be number one on the leaderboard.
Yeah.
But when money is included in it, I'm sure they will do it for sure. And so that's why I think a reputation score is going to be very, very important within Arcadia as well. And that's what we're aiming for as well. And I think one of the things I forgot to say is that um, the higher your reputation score, the more things would open up for you in Arcadia, like higher prize pool tournaments and so on and so forth.
It kind of sounds like Reddit, because at Reddit you have to like prove that you're human, and there's like a cooldown period for how many things you can upvote, and you could implement stuff like that to help like
Yeah,
combat those
for sure.
things for sure. Um, Real quick, news that was in the space this week. Sony announced that they were gonna acquire a crypto exchange, and also in April they announced a partnership with Polygon. What is your opinion on like big publishers entering this space, trying to get into Web3? Hate it,
I
love
welcome
it.
them.
Yeah.
I welcome them. I welcome them. Number one, because it fosters a level of adoption, right? Big publishers, even when I was still a publisher, or at least kind of like toying between publishing and Web3, our Chinese publisher is already doing its own stuff, researching on what to do in Web3. The problem is, like, big publishers are legacy businesses that have very, very, very slow. How do you say that? Like
They
they're
have like
very
chains
slow.
of command. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're very slow turnaround in terms of like how do you move from Web2 to Web3, right? Because like they already have like a profitable business model. But I think this not only would create more opportunities for Web2 game developers who's trying to get into Web3, but also allows more new capitalization coming in from the Web2 space. How they're going to do it, I'm not sure exactly, but at the very least, it's a welcome change compared to like what it was like a few years ago, where nobody wants to care or nobody wants to be in the business at all.
So do you think this is actually helpful for indie developers as well for Web3?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. I think it's going to be helpful.
For sure. One more quick question and we'll get you out of here. Any announcements coming up, mints, releases coming soon? Like what's going on with your roadmap for the rest of 2024?
Rest of 2024 is going to be crazy busy. So a few announcements I would say would be there will be a mint happening fairly soon. Not sure exactly how much details I could put in there, but it's a very small mint that we are going to be doing somewhere around August to early September. Second would be a couple of campaigns happening in Arcadia. Right now, there's a live tournament in cooperation with Goat Gaming. So do check that out if you want to win some prizes as well. And then maybe we could run a tournament in Catalyst's honor. And so we could give you guys a private tournament where only people within the people watching Catalyst, for example, could join and compete. But other than that, a lot of things in store for the next 3 months. So do watch out for the stuff that we're doing. I saw a tweet yesterday where like OP Games, I've never heard of them. Well, now you will. So do watch out for the stuff that we're now you have, and you eventually will continuously. We're gonna be noisy moving forward, but there's a lot of cool stuff happening. A play to airdrop campaign is also in the works, so do watch out for that. I'll keep you posted on the details moving forward.
Hell yeah, I love that. Definitely could talk in the future about the tournament thing when all the boys is present. Kind of scattered out right now at this point, but I think it was a great show. I'm gonna give you the floor to have any closing thoughts, and we'll close this out.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess like closing thoughts on OP Games and gaming in general is that like Web3 in general is still new. There's a lot of players in play right now trying to make a difference within the Web3 space. OP Games is one of them. And so if you guys are interested in checking out more of the project, first off, go to opgames.org. That's our website. That's going to be changed pretty soon, so it's going to be a cooler website moving forward. Number 2 would be arcadia.fun. Arcadia.fun is kind of like where you play arcade games and hopefully have fun. And the third one will be Spark. Just follow us for now on Twitter on Spark. We don't have a website yet for that, but once we do, that means that you can start sparking some of the NFTs that you already have. And then lastly, if you're a game developer, do join us at opguild.dev. We'll help you sort you out with your Web2 to Web3 journey. But other than that, thank you for having me, Hado and Damien, and hopefully Cloudz. See you again once your power is back up.
Absolutely. Well, it's
it.
been a great episode. Pleasure having you on the show. Love that you come back sometime in the future as well. Boys, girls, this is the episode 34 of the Cloudz Effect featuring OP Games. Hope you guys enjoyed the stream, and we'll see you guys next time. Same time next week, same damn place. We'll see you next time, guys. Peace. Shut up, David.